Welcome to PerspectiveCon! We're hanging out in real life, taking a break from the virtual world, and getting to know each other. Welcome to PerspectiveCon. Tonight is a very momentous occasion as we celebrate the vibrant community of composers of perspective who shape the worlds of film, television, and video games. To engage and celebrate the efforts of our peers, both seasoned and newcomer alike. This is what PerspectiveCon is all about. I want to express my heartfelt appreciation to our amazing sponsors. Your generosity empowers us to continue pushing the boundaries of our craft and inspiring the next generation of composers. I also want to express our heartfelt appreciation to our esteemed panelists. Each of them brings a unique perspective to the table, challenging us to think differently, experiment boldly, and create fearlessly. I also would like to extend a special thanks to Richard Kraft, our keynote speaker. The gold nuggets of wisdom he has given throughout our forum has changed a lot of composers' lives. So we eagerly anticipate your address tonight and the wisdom you will impart. And to you, our guests, composers, seasoned and emerging, industry professionals and media enthusiasts alike. Your presence here tonight is a testament to the strength and vitality of perspective. For the last 8 years, the Perspective Forum has served and continues to serve as our media scoring town hall and as a beacon of creativity and collaboration, bringing together composers from around the world to share knowledge, exchange ideas, including some feisty ones at times, and support one another in our artistic endeavors. We also pay tribute to our visionary, Miriam Mayer, the founder of Perspective and my friend. We honor her memory with the legacy and the inaugural Miriam Mayer Perspective Composer Grant. And later this evening, we will present our inaugural award to not only one, but 2 talented composers. Let me tell you briefly how Perspective came to be. A group of us were part of a cool media scoring forum where Richard Kraft was posting free advice and fun stories. We all enjoyed his posts so much, but the creator of that forum, not so much. So we were all, like Adonis said, ceremoniously booted from that forum. Miriam then jumped at the opportunity to give Richard and all of us a platform where we could all learn from him, but also share our own passion for media scoring. Miriam once wrote in our forum, whether you use perspective for tech advice, advice on getting work, or just a laugh now and then, perspective is what you make of it. So as we gather here tonight, let us honor Miriam's legacy by continuing to build upon the foundation she created. Let us embrace the spirit of collaboration and camaraderie that defines our community. And let us continue to push the boundaries of what is possible in the world of music and media. Once again, thank you to our generous sponsors, and thank you for all for being here tonight. Thank you so much. And now let me introduce our keynote speaker, Mr. Richard Kraft.
So, it is interesting we are here because I am so obnoxious. If I had not offended somebody who had a website, a forum of her own, we would not be here. Tonight, I want to focus on one of the key aspects of achieving success. I'm going to tell you a story. I was impulsive, which is typical, and saw some people roller skating, and I realized I do not know how to roller skate. But there was a rental thing, and there was a sign for 1 hour of lessons. So I signed up, and my instructor came out, and it was a 12-year-old boy. And he had a helmet and knee pads and a wrist guard. And I put him on, and I go, what do I do now? And he goes, fall down. It's like, what? He goes, fall on your knees right now. It's like, I'm not doing that. And he goes, yes, you are. You paid for your lesson. So I fell to my knees, and I had knee pads, so it was okay. So I stood up. He goes, do it again. For 30 minutes, all I did was fall to my knees. So I did that, and then I realized we only had 5 more minutes left in the lesson. And I go, well, when are you going to teach me how to skate? He goes, oh, that's easy. I taught you how not to be afraid of falling. And that is what skating is. And by feeling ultra confident at falling, I learned to skate. And all stories I ever tell end up having to do with Walt Disney. So that is our first. Can we all see Walt? Okay. So Walt Disney has a great quote. And he said, I think it is important to have a good, hard failure when you're young. I learned a lot out of that because it makes the kind of you aware of what is happening. Because of it, I've never had any fear in my whole life. I've been near collapse and all of that, yet I've never been afraid. There's a reason the rear view mirror in your car is smaller than the windshield. You really should spend some time looking backwards, but it should be brief. It should be, what little lessons can I get out of this? But much more important is next. And when things go south, they're usually a complex set of dynamics for me to reflect upon, and it usually involves thinking about both sides. From my end, I've been fired for a wide range of reasons, including misreading situations, insensitivity on my part, not following up on commitments, my loss of interest, my arrogance, and many other flaws of character. One of the things I had to learn was perspective. I am not defined by one composer or even as being an agent. My life is a tapestry. The comings and goings of people in and out of my life help make up that quilt. Certain relationships belong in certain chapters. Then things evolve and you get to go to the next part of your life. Let's face it, you are going to get rejected a lot. And this is an industry of rejection. Phone calls unreturned, emails unanswered, meetings that don't pan out, and jobs not gotten. These aren't the exceptions. They're what happens the overwhelming majority of the time. And that's okay. Actually, piling up rejections is better than okay. It's fantastic. It means you were trying. It means you were taking some risks. It means you were putting yourself out there. It means you're empowering yourself. It means you're being proactive about running your life. So thank you, Mr. Rejection. You are the stepping stones to the path of succeeding. You don't bother me. You are just a necessary part of the process. So pursue rejection. Instead of avoiding it, push forward. Pick up that phone and make a bunch of phone calls to people that are likely to reject you. Submit yourself on projects knowing almost none of them are going to yield results. Go to festivals, conferences, screenings, and other events and put yourself out there introducing yourself to a lot of people who will probably never get back to you. Measure your success by how many rejections you can achieve. Become the person who weathers setbacks. Hell, not just weather them, but use them as fuel to push you into the future. Try to live your life and career full enough, with enough risk that you are getting rejected every single day. Hopefully, you're rejected at least 5 times a day. Do it. Make it a major part of your life. Walk through the thing that you fear the most. Take away its negative power over you. Rejection shouldn't kill you any more than falling on my knees would kill me. Don't give in to the fear and doubting voices in your head.
Both the death of Stalin and Disney's Mickey Mouse shorts offer unique opportunities for music storytelling. I'm curious, just how did you approach composing for each of these projects, considering the kind of distinct different tones and audiences, and how do you kind of shift your mind when you're working into those projects?
First I feel I should say it's just great to be here. This is great, isn't it? The energy in here is very special. I think that's a good idea. I've been to a lot of these things that feel sort of weirdly dead. And this one is very special. This is, I don't know, this feels like the start of something. Mickey Mouse and the death of Stalin.
They go hand in hand, don't they?
Well, you know, actually, the funny thing, sort of trying to get them in front of my brain, is actually how much they have in common, actually. How similar they seem. They both, looking back, they both, there was never enough money. There was never enough time. Everything was done worrying about, how we were going to get it done in the amount of time. Both things, I couldn't really imagine having done them without being really good friends with the directors.
Yeah.
In each case, being genuinely good friends, not just sort of weird bullshit kind of
Right.
faking it friends, but actually kind of
Not just
being,
work friends, but people, yeah.
so that you feel you can sort of criticize each other. They both involve lots and lots of homework, lots of research. So the Death of Stalin was all this kind of looking into Mayakovsky and Weinberg and Shostakovich and all these Soviet composers, and Mickey Mouse is all kitsch and Esquivel and Disney prehistory, kind of Disney mythology. And every project, and I'm often asked things like, how does animation differ from live action or something? And I have no answer to that at all. Both projects run completely the gamut in terms of the way that picture relates to music. I mean, it's all so complicated. There's irony, and there's things that are totally straight, and there's Mickey Mousing, but there's long stretches of the Death of Stalin where you're deliberately trying to make it sound like it's not film music, so it's sort of ignoring what's happening on screen. But then there are bits that are totally lined up. Someone shoots someone else and it actually lands on a downbeat, which is exactly what you do in a cartoon.
Those very violent cartoons. Yeah.
So I'm sort of struck thinking about that question about how everything is very difficult and everything is sort of open and at the same time everything is sort of part of the same gig.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just storytelling. I mean, it's the story in front of you and the story you're trying to tell with the characters. We're going to jump over to Sherry. So, Sherry, your latest project, based on a true story, is a dark comedy thriller. Can you walk us through your composing process for a show that blends, again, kind of such contrasting tones, and how did you use music to kind of balance the humor with kind of the underlying suspense?
What was that? What was the question?
How do you write music?
Wait, can we just stop, can we just hold it up for just 1 second? Just can we just, because we all just need a minute to wait, these chairs are about to fall down.
I know, we're all balancing really,
yeah.
We're working our core right now.
Yeah. I know we have limited time in the panel, but this is really cool. The PerspectiveCon is really, really cool, and I think it's really awesome that we're all gathering here, talking about things that are affecting all our industry, and I think it's really cool to be invited onto the panel. So, Based on a True Story is a comedic thriller and I have never done a comedic thriller before. I think most of the projects that I've had the privilege to work on are they're much more straightforward. You know who the villain is, you know what you're fighting for. It's like justice will prevail, and it's a superhero or it's a romantic comedy. You're always rooting. You always know who you're rooting for. And I think the challenge that I found in this particular story was that the person we were rooting for is kind of is the villain, or is it? And so I think that was kind of really interesting. And I think overall, what I learned also most on the project is that it wasn't just about comedy, horror, hilarity and darkness and that kind of thing, and murder mystery. But a lot of it really had to do with finding the nuance in between that. I kind of liken it to like a nervous laugh. It's you're not really sure if this is a good thing or a bad thing. And so I think musically, a lot of what I was trying to do had to do with I imagined, we're all very visual people, but I imagined a very, very tight string. And if you pluck the string, does it snap? And does it snap and everybody laughs? Does it snap and everybody dies? What's the whole thing? So in terms of instrumentation, there were a lot of times I just tried to, pizzicato is always funny, but what could I use it in somewhat of a nervous way or somewhat of a really, dangerous way? And so I think, like I said, the nuance between the humor and between the darkness in terms of instrumentation, very cutting, pointed instruments, hand percussion that uses very, this very, very tight drum heads, very, very small types of percussion things, and then also juxtaposed with very loud, sudden bangs that maybe take you out of the moment, take you out of the groove. And I think the challenge for me too was also restraint. I'm very much of a maximalist, which I don't know if that's a word, but it's just the opposite of a minimalist. And I just tend to throw things at it, which isn't to say that it's not an ego thing. It's really just more like, just trying new things. And so a lot of the collaboration that with the showrunner Craig Rosenberg, and the creator and the writer, a lot of his comments were just, like that's on the screen. That's on the screen. We don't need to actually do that. Now that's kind of a lesson that I think we all learn in school, but when you're there in the moment, I think it was something that, there were times where it really did require a lot more than just what was on screen. And so a lot of it was, finding that the sort of controlled tension in things, and really also leaning into the zaniness and the sort of the cheekiness of the entire genre of comedic thrillers. It's a matter of giving the audience permission to laugh at something that's really dark and is totally not PC to laugh at.
Which is, I think it's just amazing that, all of you have that job of finding that tone, and I think genre, at least for me, genre is good for marketing. It's like, it's a comedy, it's a thriller, but nothing is never just straightforward anything. Like, you're going to have, even in, a comedy, you're going to have maybe some sentimentality, some emotion and stuff, and it has to balance and it has to work, and you all are masters of just navigating that and weaving that, and it's impressive to me every time I see it, so. But I do want to jump over to Nick next. So Nick, in Empire Queen, The Golden Age of Magic, you strike a wonderful balance between the fantastical themes, action sequences, and even some campy humor. So, because talking about all these different kind of tones. Can you talk about the challenges and rewards of composing a score that seamlessly blends kind of, again, these contrasting elements, kind of bring them all together for what the story needs?
That's a lot.
You did it.
That's true. Yeah, it's. I'll start off by saying that the film was actually based on these music videos that the director, Chris Dane Owens, who was actually the son of Gary Owens, who did the Powdered Toast Man voice. So he has that history. He created these high fantasy videos, and one of the challenges was kind of capturing that essence that they created, like these videos from 10 years ago, into this feature film, because the third video was supposed to be this feature film. So, and you have the classic story of like evil or good versus evil. So we had themes for this trio of characters, and it's kind of like a blend, almost like Harry Potter and Princess Bride. So you run that gamut if you want to pitch you something like that. So, for instance, the main character Ara, her stuff is like very quirky, and then it transforms to this noble kind of like string with horn, and the whole thing was also temp with John Williams, I have to say. I don't know. He should.
Yeah.
He has something to say about
that one later.
So there's that challenge too, trying to sound original in that sense. But we got together and we decided that an orchestral choir sound was going to be it for because it had to have this sort of language that lived in this fantasy world. So you can't do synthesizers, 80s, never-ending story for this one, unfortunately. Although I like that score, it's fantastic.
Oh yeah.
So that's one of the challenges, and we faced it. The other thing, since this was in the indie filmmaking world, that's where I live in mostly. I had all the recording sessions booked, and then ready to go, and they tell me, "Sorry, we ran out of money for this." And right before I was going to schedule my thing with Budapest Scoring, actually. The check didn't come through because they had to do pickup shots in Oregon. Oh, so God. I was like, what do I do? Shit, fuck.
Yeah.
Very appropriate. I was like, okay, so this is still during the time of like COVID, because the film was released this year, but it took a while to record it and everything, because it's like 2.5 hours of music. It's crazy. So I decided to get a COVID loan to pay for the recording sessions. And I went through. And then I did my recording sessions, and at the end, they're like, by the way, we have your money back. So I was reimbursed, luckily.
Wow.
So that's one of the challenges we deal with. Not only writing music, but being like a budget person and trying to figure all this stuff out. So, all of that led to these challenges. But the rewards were great, because then the movie was, the fans loved it. And it was featured in Variety, like, I don't know, last month. So I
Yeah.
think we did pretty well.
That's amazing. Absolutely. Well, let's jump over to Gordy. So Gordy, how did you, of course, congrats on Star Wars: A Jedi Survivor, and of course, congrats on the ASCAP Composer's Choice Awards. I mean, well deserved. Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I mean, you and Steven did such amazing work. So, I mean, how did you approach composing for the Star Wars Jedi Survivor video game while honoring kind of the established musical themes and motifs? And did you introduce any new elements to differentiate this game from others in the franchise? So, keeping it feeling Star Wars, but, your voice.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so we talk a lot about rejection tonight. And I guess one of the things a lot of times composers don't talk about is rejecting their own ideas.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was a very big part of that, the process of working on Star Wars, the franchise that made me want to be a composer in the first place as a kid. It's like now I'm dropped in the middle of this franchise and I have to live up to, some of the greatest music ever written for film, and it was pretty daunting. And I'm talking, before the Jedi series, because I've been working on the Star Wars games for a bit over a decade. The Battlefront series was really interesting because, the direction to me was, we want you to write the B-side to the album, the John Williams soundtrack. So it's like I really had to kind of like embrace that music and deal with sort of this fan pressure, that I knew was out there. There's, billions of fans that were ready to tear me apart for even touching this material. And so for me, it was a lot of, me sitting alone, rejecting my own ideas over and over and over again before I even let them out of my own studio. And, that was a big part of my process. And at a certain point, and I'm getting to your question because this is an important part of sort of my development in this franchise of developing my own aesthetic. There's a certain point where I kind of was faced with one of two choices. I could do John Williams, I could do pastiche, I could do like a paint by numbers, or I could do something completely original that was me, or find some kind of balance in between. And this paint by numbers thing, I feel like if I had chosen that route, it's a recipe for, having that music rejected by the community, by the fan base, because it's always going to be second rate to what the original was. So my choice was to, rather than do paint by numbers, was to use the same palette that John Williams used. So, if I was using as a sort of a painting metaphor, taking a palette where maybe there's like a Monet where most of the colors are like, yellows and blues and whites, and then you take something like Kandinsky where it's, very stark angles, but it's yellows, blues, and whites. It's the same palette, completely different piece of art. So that was sort of my approach to, creating my own musical aesthetic in this franchise. I have this already existing pretty fantastic score. And I carried that through all of the scores that are written for the franchise, in particular the Jedi series, because it's so big. And because it has its own unique story and narrative, it gave us an opportunity to, really stretch out the sound a bit more. And we definitely did that. And, Sherry, you're talking about being what was the word you used? A maximalist.
Oh, yeah. That's me.
At heart, I'm more of a minimalist, despite the music that I tend to get to write. So I actually find it kind of daunting when the sky's the limit. I like putting parameters on things. I do exercises in my studio when I'm like starting to write, where I have these die, like 12-sided die with all the 12 pitches on it. And I'll roll them, and I'll like try to create how many different ways can I voice these 4 notes, that kind of thing. And I do these little parameter exercises to kind of get myself in the right mindset to write. So I really thrive within parameters. But when you say, okay, well, we can have, the London Symphony and a full choir and a boys choir and any synth you want, we can hire this guitarist and that, these drummers and do pretty much anything, and we can record at Abbey Road for 45 days or whatever it was we recorded. That's actually daunting as well, because it's like, oh my God, it's like everything is possible now. How do I narrow it down to the ideas that really work? So for me, it was really just always coming back to the story. The story has to like drive the decisions with the music. And so it's all about narrative.
And I mean, but also I really appreciate how the music works for gameplay as well. As a gamer, I mean, it's such a huge part of gaming and writing game music is the gameplay.
Yeah, very much so. And I mean, a game like Star Wars Jedi, Fallen Order, and Survivor, both of them, because they are story driven. I mean, they're very much a narrative.
Very linear, yeah.
It was much more like scoring a film than it was like a game, because probably for each of those games there's probably about 4 hours worth of cutscene material, which is really just scoring the picture. So it's like scoring 2 feature films on each of them, you know. And working in narrative is something that I'm very comfortable. I actually like working in film as well. You know, while I was working on the Jedi series, I was also working on this big Chinese epic film that came out last summer. I mean, I was actually working on it 3 years ago, and they waited to release it. But, you know, that was one of the ones where it was like something completely different than what I was working on with Star Wars, musically, aesthetically. Yeah. And also the process was so much different. You're talking about revisions. I mean, that film, I think the average cue that I wrote made it to about version 50. Some of them went higher. And, you know, so I was dealing with that rejection while I was working on Star Wars at the same time, which, you know, very luckily, you know, very few cues were getting rejected on the Star Wars thing. I think it was just because we had such a good team dynamic, and we did a lot of planning in advance and that kind of thing, so we knew what we were going for. But
absolutely.
But yeah, so it's
50. That's
always a challenge, regardless of what it is.
But I want to jump over to JB again. So we have let's talk about a hypothetical scenario to explore your approach and advice for managing challenging situations. So let's say the scenario is, say you're in a presentation meeting with a director, a few producers, and the studio's head of music, where the first playback of cues is reviewed and various opinions are expressed. How do you effectively navigate this scenario? What would I guess what's the first thing to do in that situation, in that kind of meeting?
Wait a minute, that's not hypothetical.
That happened to you yesterday, didn't it?
Were you in the Transformers meetings somewhere? Because that was exactly what happened in our Transformers meetings. Because
we can use
I mean, about 2 months before we started scoring, we started these reviews. And it was every Friday we were going to review a reel, or about a half a reel to a reel of music for the film. And we had the editor, the director, the producer, the music supervisor. Music supervisor. Our head of music. The only person that wasn't there was Michael Bay. Everybody was in the room. And first of all, I was shitting bricks. Because, you know, I spent time with the director going through everything, and he would approve, and I was like, okay, now we're going to go in front of the committee, right? And we had to make sure that they were okay. And we had no idea. I thought I was going to get fired. I was done. I was like, I'm done. But surprisingly, it went pretty well the first meeting. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not fired. I get to live another day. But we did end up with some contention at times. Now, we had a couple of ground rules. One is, if you had an opinion about the music, you had to be in the room. So no one could phone in their opinion after the fact. Yeah. Because everybody had to listen to the conversation, and we had to resolve it in the room.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, I just kept my mouth shut. And I let them talk it through, right?
Yeah.
And thank you so much. Keeping your mouth shut is very smart. And then they would see the, you know, contradiction in what they were saying. And they would have arguments about, I'm just sitting back, I'm just watching. And then they finally get a chance to resolve it, or this or that, or they come and ask my opinion, and then we would have a conversation about it. But we weren't going to leave the room until we had a clear sense of what we as a group wanted to do. So that was another groundwork. And the other thing was, when I came into the room, my opinion, or at least my attitude, was not to get everything approved, but to understand what I need to do next. Because when we walk in with this desire, please approve me, please accept me, please whatever, people can feel that. As opposed to just like, hey, let's figure this thing out and let me know what I need to do next. So you have to tell me what we're going to do next. And that took a lot of pressure out of the room.
Yeah.
Because we were there trying to fix it together in a sense of collaboration.
We're a storytelling team.
Storytelling team.
Yeah.
So, you know, for me, it was been fostering that thing of teamwork, making sure that everybody was in the room, and keeping your damn mouth shut.
Absolutely. Well, we are getting a little bit short on time, and we did have a bunch more questions, but thankfully we have a forum that maybe I can post these on later, and we can all talk about it later. But to wrap up our panel today, you know, the beautiful thing about Perspective is there's so many people from different stages of their careers, from people, you know, who have been doing it for 40 years, people who are just starting out. So I'm curious, maybe we can go down the line and very quickly say, what advice would you give to aspiring composers who are looking to break into the world of composing film, TV, and games? And maybe what's like one of the most important qualities, like one quality that you would say was very important to have when you're starting out? Chris, if you want to kick us off.
Right. I think the thing that defines film, the sort of cohort that have recently been students of film music is the very fact that there are now so many courses and there are so many universities and there are so many people. So I think more than ever, doing that normal sort of USC thing is a bit pointless because there's so many other people. So you have to have something that you do that not many other people do. That would be my number one nugget, really. You have something. You absolutely do. Something that you may think is eccentric and not even a positive. But that's going to be the thing. And there are lots of great composers who have some strange thing that they do. There aren't really any super duper famous, absolutely loved composers who just sort of do everything, any old how.
Embrace your weirdness. Embrace what makes you weird. Sherry.
It's a journey. Enjoy the journey. There's no destination, so don't make awards or hardware or just really know your own definition of success. And I think that from that you'll kind of find your way through that. And I think the other thing too, on an artistic level, because we are in a business where it's a service industry, we're marrying art with commerce here, which is really, really difficult. Just when you get a job, take time and have a conversation with your director, producer, showrunner, hopefully the writer, and just and really ask them questions and don't be afraid to push boundaries, because as JB was saying, it's not about approval. This is about a you're coming together to tell a story. And there's deadlines to be made and money at stake and all that kind of thing. But you are artists, so bring your art. Bring your art to it. Bring your opinions. They matter, and don't be afraid to push that and explore that.
Yeah, and we have to. I don't want to eat into other panels. So maybe what's the one, JB, one word quality that you should have? What characteristic that it's important to have starting out?
Love film.
There you go.
2 words.
There,
That's really
Gordy,
it.
what's your one word characteristic to have starting out?
Keep your eyes wide open,
There you go. Wide open.
because you never know.
Resourcefulness.
Resourcefulness. There we go. I want to jump over to JV. So let's talk Transformers: Rise of the Beast. So you got to jump into this amazing franchise, which is known for its incredible action sequences. And as someone who grew up on 90s action, and of course a lover of what Michael Bay started and how the whole franchise and what Steve started with Michael Bay and how you kind of took over, I was such a fan of what you did. So I'm curious, give it up for. Didn't he did such an amazing job adding his voice to this franchise. So I'm curious, as a storyteller, how did you approach action, these key action sequences, and kind of what kind of instruments or techniques did you use to really just, tackle all those changing edits and just make sure that the everything flows? I'm just curious of your perspective of it.
You're bringing back my trauma. Thank you so much for that.
I'm sure Steve probably shared all his trauma too.
He
Passed
did.
it on
He
to
did.
you.
He passed it all to me, and now I get to share it with you. So thank you so much. So before Transformers: Rise of the Beast, I was the documentary guy.
Yeah.
I was the romantic comedy guy. I was not the action guy, right? But it was always the kind of music that I wanted to write.
Yeah.
When I envisioned getting into this career, I envisioned working on these types of movies. So with the help of Richard Kraft, who I did not fire.
Yeah.
No, not going to happen, buddy. Not going to happen. Not going to happen. There'll be no next with me. But when we got the gig, I was like, this is my moment. Well, it was not my moment at first. I started working on these big set pieces, and I could not get a cue approved through my director. The emotional stuff, no problem. The connective stuff, not an issue. But really, the action stuff, I couldn't get a single cue approved through the director. And it wasn't until I started listening to the way he listened to music that I could really understand what got him excited. And there were three things that sort of popped out to me through taking this very sort of humbling approach and really sort of getting into his head. One, he really appreciated short rhythmic phrases that had some sort of pause or rest in between, so we could hear them as discrete phrases that could build to some sort of event. And that was something that really resonated with him. It's like, I want to feel like I'm getting to something. It's building, 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 and then we hit something. And it wasn't about coming up with these great little sort of ostinatos or these melodies or whatever. No, he wanted a rhythmic thing that he could latch onto, that he could feel as a nugget that was building to some sort of event. So that was the first thing. Really leaning into rhythms that were distinct and that were specific and that I could repeat no more than 3 times, because after that he got bored, leading up to something. Second was that he didn't hear changes in traditionally like how we hear it in music. Changes in harmony, modulating to a different key, adding a different textures. He didn't hear any of that. He's like, it's all the same wash of crap. What is this? It's all the same. And I'm like, wow, like I'm doing everything here. I'm throwing the kitchen sink. I'm throwing in, new modulations. I'm throwing in this. He's like, no, I don't hear it. That's all the same.
Yeah.
And what I got from that is he needs massive changes in texture. And that when we got to that point that he wanted us to hit, I had to change the texture entirely. Throw out the entire orchestra, just go to percussion. Or throw everything else out and just deal with synths. Or adding some sort of some sort of effect, right? Or a sound effect or something that just woke up his ear, and he said that was exciting. And then, of course, I couldn't lean on that too long, so we had to move on to something else after that. So that was the second thing, big changes in textures, what he heard. And the third one was the one that really broke my heart, honestly, was long notes slowed down the action for him.
Wow.
Long notes slowed down. That so means I couldn't really use any of these massive themes that I came up with in action sequences, right? Because for him, his ear went straight to the long notes. And I didn't hear anything else. Even though I got the entire orchestra chugging along underneath that, he's like, I don't hear any of that. All I go is to the melody. So what that taught me is I have to really come up with textures or sound effects or rhythms that are interesting, because I'm not going to be able to grab the ear with a theme or a melody and really just save those for hero moments or villain moments. So when the hero comes on screen, I can get the melody in for like 3 seconds and then get out and then go back to something else. Or when a villain comes in and something exciting, I got a melody, I got 5 seconds to get the theme in real quick and then get out. And he was okay with those things, so they were more sort of like announcing something that was important. So that's kind of how we built a lot of the score. And if you listen to a lot of the action pieces like Battle of Ellis Island or The Final Battle Begins on the soundtrack, you'll hear a lot of these ideas. And once we started implementing that, stuff started getting approved.
Yeah. Wow. That's incredible. I mean, action to me, I think it may seem simple and just rhythms and all that, but it's so complex and there's always moving pieces and it's its own. I just finished liner notes with Hans for, I can't announce, it's an unannounced expanded score we're doing, but he reflected back on, again, misinterpreting his director and almost getting fired. This was back, early 90s, early in his career, and it was kind of big first time doing action, and he just could not get that communication. It took him a while to finally figure out what his director was really focusing on. So I think that's an interesting, especially the collaborative process of that. That's fantastic.
Well, I'm glad I'm in good company then.
Yeah.
I want to invite Jim up to the podium with me. Jim is Miriam's husband, Jim Garofalo. Thank you for being here tonight.
I was so very touched by the video memorial tribute to Miriam. That was just so great. I just thought it might be of interest. I remember the morning, it was the day after that Facebook website that you were talking about that kicked Richard off of it. And Miriam, we were having breakfast and she said, I've got this great idea to make this Facebook website. And, she just saw that opportunity. That morning she talked to Richard and she just jumped on it and made it happen. And it was a great experience for her. She really loved interacting with people, and it created this whole other gigantic community for her to interact with. And it was just a great thing for her life. I'm sure you all know you don't choose to be a composer. It chooses you because it's your heart's desire. And that's what it was with Miriam. I mean, she was just so happy engaging with the film community and working on projects. I used to watch her working, and I could just see the wheels turning in her mind and just see her in that flow. And even when she was like really ill, she would like go up to her studio, start working, and just feel great. She'd be happy. She was a fierce feminist, and I know she would really be happy about these awards, going to women composers. And, it's great to see women now, making inroads into the film industry. She just wanted to see an environment where women could like prove their worth in the film industry. And she would just have really loved this idea of this grant. It's really great. Just wanted to thank you all for coming here tonight. Really appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Without further ado, I want to share that Miriam's was a testament to her unwavering dedication to nurturing talent, fostering innovation within our community, and this represents a commitment to supporting emerging composers and providing them with the resources they need to pursue their artistic dreams. So let me tell you a little bit about what the grant recipients will receive tonight. We have the Premier Bundle, courtesy of Heaviosity, worth $9,000. Shared session slot with Budapest Scoring, 59-piece full orchestra, video shooting, mixing, mastering, the whole deal for $3,900, courtesy of Budapest Scoring. The Metropolis Arc Bundle, $3,300, courtesy of Orchestral Tools. Cinematic Studio Strings, $400, courtesy of Cinematic Studio Series. A $450 coupon toward demystifying the composer business, thanks to Brian Ralston. And a copy of A Note Tells Every Story, The Transformative Power of Music in Visual Media, thanks to Shai Razov. And we also have a cash stipend of $500 they can choose to spend it however they want. I hope this grant serves as a catalyst for your continued growth and success in the world of music composition. So now it's my distinct privilege to announce the recipients of the 2024 Miriam Mayer Perspective Composer Grant. Our first recipient is Michelle Isaac. And our second recipient is Nyla Smith. Yes, give them a round of applause, please. Now, Michelle and Nyla, your talent, dedication, and passion for music have not only impressed our selection committee, but have captured our hearts and minds of everyone here tonight. On behalf of the entire Perspective community and here at PerspectiveCon, I extend my heartfelt congratulations to you too. May this grant be the first of many milestones on your journey to musical greatness. So let's give it up for our recipients.